Okay, hi everyone. We'll be starting on time. So it's my pleasure today to share the stage with those 5 people with whom we're going to discuss health, application and care, application of AI for health and care. So to start with, I will ask each of them to present themselves, present what they're doing, so shortly, just so we get the time to talk together afterwards. But let's start by this. So maybe Cécile, you'll be the first.
Yeah, well, the first and the only one. Yeah. May I say? No. Well, thank you for this invitation. And I'm a professor in pathology. I'm well now in Gustave Roussy, and I'm the head of the department of biology and pathology. And I used to do my research in the understanding of the microenvironment in Le Parc. So I'm deeply interested in AI and how we can have the implementation of the knowledge of the different tissues. So I'm one of the happy person in Prairie to have a chair dedicated to AI. And I'm in Université Cité. And well, I think that's it.
So I'm another happy person that has a share in Prairie. Only happy people in Prairie, yes. And I'm also a CNRS researcher in applied math, so I'm doing AI on health, but also other matters. And I have another cap. I'm the chief scientific officer of the National Health Data Platform that is called the Health Data Hub, which is a public interest group that was funded 6 years ago within the national strategy on AI. So AI is very important for us, and the main goal is to facilitate access to health data for public interest research. And I guess we'll be talking about it, but the Health Data Hub today is clearly the flagship national platform in Europe for what is under construction today, which is the European Health Data Space.
So hi, I'm also happy Prairie chair, and we have 2 other chairs in the lab. So I'm the head of the Decision and Bayesian Computation Group, Epidemiology. We're a joint pastor in RIE AI, CNRS, and Université Cité group. In the lab, we do 2 things. We do, for 2/3 of the lab, Drosophila larva modeling and neuroscience, and 1/3 application of software and AI in the hospital. And I'm also the CSO of a spin-off of Institut Pasteur and Institut Curie Avatar Medical.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alexandre Loupy. I'm a professor of medicine, a nephrologist by training, and I'm the director of the Paris Institute for Transplantation and Organ Regeneration. Most of my research is dedicated towards addressing with multimodal approaches, prognostics, precision diagnostics in all components of solid organ transplantation, ranging from kidney to heart, lung, liver, and also to build models to empower clinical trials. And I'm also the co-founder of a spin-off startup from INSERM, Cité, and PARCC, which is called Okero, that encapsulate all these algorithms into softwares that serves as decision-making empowerment systems.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Vincent Luciani. I'm chairman and co-founder of a company called Artefact. So I guess I'm the only non-professor member today, so it's a big challenge on me. So we created Artefact 10 years ago to help organizations improve their capacity with data and AI. So we work with healthcare industry, but not only. So in the healthcare department, we do mainly 3 things. The first is work with researchers and institutions on how to accelerate research using Gen AI. For example, in helping Python filing, for example, or in drug discovery. The second thing we do is during clinical trials, how to accelerate, finding the right patient during clinical trials, or accelerate the process itself. And we also work with hospitals to accelerate every small tasks you can have in every part of the administration. And thank you very much.
Okay, so myself, I'm Olivier Cappé, so I'm a researcher as well, but in computer science, so I'm not from the field, if you ask. So maybe a small question, easy question to start with, will be there have been other roundtables. They've been all discussing AI, but what is for you the main specificity? What are for you the main specificity of using AI for care in the domain of care? So I know that some of you have done research. So Emmanuel, for instance, I know that you have done research in other fields. You were saying as well that Artefact is also developing AI technology in other fields. So what are for you, say, maybe answers are different for each of you, but what are the specificity of using AI in this field? Sorry. So who wants to start? Say
well,
something?
as a pathologist, is routine is in my routine. Well, now the first step for the pathologist is to have digitalization of the different lab. It's a long way because it's costly and very important to have all the network well able to have the numerization of the different lab. But when you are numerized, then you can have the implementation of well AI algorithm, and there are some solved and some well homemade made in the different structures and collaboration. So for me, it's now, and there's a lot of different algorithm with the ability to be used in routine, like prospective one, like giving some information about the response to the therapy, or helping the pathologist to do well, have new tools to be efficient in the stratification of the different cancer. For example, in the morning, selecting the different slide where there's cancer or not, and then the cancer one are seen in emergency before the other, and having tools to just have information about the tumors we need to put in the report. So it's my life now for the pathologist.
If I can give a kind of a macro answer, like if I compare it to the other fields, you know, we are all talking about the revolution of AI with all the risks, all the good impacts for good things. And I think health is one, I mean, maybe the only vertical where you can see almost everything. You can see almost all the risks there are in health, all the benefits. I mean, when we think about AI for good, the first thing we think about, of course, is health also. So I think it's a concentration of all the challenges of AI that we're facing today. So that's why it's so interesting working on that. And one thing that is maybe not a particularity of health, but it shares that with many other verticals, the importance of data. That the fact we are talking a lot about a revolution of AI again, but at the core of this revolution for health, there is a revolution of data, and I mean, we will be talking about that, I guess, later, but data plays such an important role. It's so important. I would say even more, maybe I'm going to shock some people, but maybe even more than new methodologies in AI. The key points are trying to have good data, organized data, and so on, but we'll come back on that, I'm sure.
We can say two things. So one thing is about research, and one is more about the application in the hospital. That's exactly what you just said. One of the issues is data, and maybe in healthcare there is this complexity of statistical bias present in the data that are very interesting to the nature of the where they are collected from. A hospital is not something that sample people perfectly randomly. You have people who go to the hospital, it depends on the distance, it depends on the city, it depends on how diverse the city is. So within your data, you do have this bias in the statistics, and then it will be seen within your model. So you have a key question, because everything is driven by regulation, getting access to the data, getting universal data, except if the health data suddenly works perfectly and is able to acquire everything, creates complexity.
It's on its way. It's on its way.
I'm sure it is. And as long as you have the patience and the energy. And but there there are complexities, and it's not just for the joke. There are reasons why there are those rules, and because of these informations. But all of this will be seen in the models, and then you'll have challenges in try to generalize them. If you go on the industry part, it is a highly regulated environment, and for good reasons. So everything has to fit at the end with regulation. At some point, if you want your AI something to be FDA granted, you need to prove some rules and everything, which are well thought. It's not an adversarial process, it's an interesting process in which all these steps have to be done. So there is also elements to prove. Tomorrow, how are you going to prove that an algorithm for segmenting whatever is going to be universal? It's not necessarily possible. So you're going to do recommendation. Recommendation is not the same regulation. So all of this is going to matter both in the way you do your research, but also in the type of application that you can have in the healthcare domain.
Can I add one thing? So for me, working different industries, it's probably where I see the most impact using a technology. If you think about, for example, the average time from finding a new drug to a new molecule to putting a drug on the market, it's on average up to 10 years, right? And the cost could be 2 to 3 billion. It's massive. The promise of using AI along the value chain is reducing the lead time by 2 or even by 3. So it's very impressive. I don't see so many industries where using a technology like that, you could have such an impact. And what is interesting as well is that it will be spread along all the value chain. You can have research, you can have a regulation, as said. You can have problematic around market access, supply chain, distribution with hospitals. So the impact could be, spread along all this. So what is also very important in these industries is a variety of jobs and people, working together. And the last has been mentioned is data. Usually, when you deploy such a technological approach, you need a solid data governance with structured databases, identify patterns and everything. Working in healthcare environment, what is the most difficult is probably data access, but not only data access, it's also flagging the data, having the same taxonomy, the same governance definition. It's one of the most difficult challenge. I'm sure we'll continue talking about it with Health Data Hub, but it's probably one of the most difficult. So the most ambitious promise, but also the most difficult battle with data.
I would like to express the clinician point of view, and this is my clinician hat here, because we're talking about AI and care. So as physicians, and that's true in transplantation, but many other specialties, and I'm sure Cécile is also facing that. What do we need to address when we have a patient in front of us? We have to master the complexity of the 21st century. We are flooded by tons of data. And when you speak about transplant patients, we now have a constellation of biomarkers, genetic testing, and environmental factor, complex treatments. And so we need to act as statistician. I mean, we are using and processing in your mind as physician, taking into account our entire experience, and try to draw predictions for patients. Our decision-making process is guided by predictions, risk assessment that we are kind of computing in our head, again, with our experience. And to draw those trajectories, we found out that it's very difficult. We have inherent bias. Our discrimination is bad. The calibration between physicians is awful. And you are not any better if you're a full professor than a research, and an associate professor. I mean, we publish that. So that's true in transplantation. So the promise is that to master the complexity of the 21st century, as every physician has used technologies to kind of circumvent the inadequacy of our senses, like microscope, like X-ray, like electrocardiogram. We now have the cognoscope, which is the need that you can draw from the data meaningful informations for decision-making process, addressing disease activity, disease stage, response to treatment. And nowadays, if we want to be empowered physicians, we'll need to have algorithms that help us to make those decisions, to decide whether we're going to put treatment A or B. And beyond empowering clinical trials, I think in the daily routine care of patients, we are really now pushing this algorithm to a point, and we can discuss that later, that we have the proof that we can actually be cost efficient, we can augment the longevity of allografts, and we can explore many research fields. But really for the patient care, I think it's something of utmost importance.
Well, I should ask a little thing is, well, yes, data is the main point. But using new algorithm, like using some in tissues, for example, we've got new data. So I mean, even if we've got eyes, we've got experiments and plenty of these things and data coming from the clinic, then the machine is able also to just raise new information we can't have without using this kind of algorithm.
And if I may add something also to what you, Vincent and Alexandre said, we're talking about impact and how much, I mean, how big it could be. There is one thing that is extremely hard to do in this vertical, which is measuring this impact in real life. So in every vertical, in all the industries, when you are deploying a new product, you talk about measuring the return on investment. This is something that is almost impossible on health. I mean, I don't know, I mean, I hardly know maybe a few hospitals in the world that are able to, once a medical device with AI deployed on the hospital, to measure the return on investment, which is something so basic when you are from an industry. I mean, something, it's so hard, and this is a major problem.
And just one word about impact, because all these algorithms, you find so many out there. And I'm not talking about like vision imaging, I'm talking about patient care management. The proof that an algorithm can actually provide a benefit to the patient in a randomized controlled trials comparing standard of care with the physician empowered by AI-based decision-making process. If you make a huge benchmark, there are very few studies. And we, tried in transplantation to prove that an algorithm that was qualified by EMA and recently the FDA was able to actually change care. It costs a lot of time, energy to provide those randomized trials, because when there is so much fame on AI, is that we do have nice tools, but how these tools actually have the proof of clinical utility is something which is like a much higher bar, and I'm really much pushing towards every single algorithm we publish to test whether those algorithms add to standard of care.
Well, it's because it's care. So it's time, well, a lot of things with, I don't know how to measure the prioritization of all of these things. And one point is very important too, the impact in how we're going to teach medicine to our students and how they will be able to do diagnose with or without AI. This impact is really important too. And the cost of this, I don't know.
Okay, so maybe one word that several of you used is regulation. So maybe this is a word that we should discuss a bit more. Could you tell us a bit more what regulation means in this field and how you see it? Is it just something that is creating delays, or is it something that is useful? So some of you already discussed this, but can we discuss this a bit more, the role of regulation in the field?
Okay, I guess everybody's looking at me, right? Okay.
You're not the only one who
No. I mean, everybody experiences regulation as a user, but I can talk, to try to make you understand what the regulator has in mind. So yes, we all know, and it's not a specificity of France. We all know that it's hard to get access to health data. Okay, so it's something very hard, and that data has problems because it's fragmented. So you don't know what data is where, and then so the governance is also very hard. It can be extremely heterogeneous, and the data is not interoperable. These are interoperable, meaning that when you put different data together from different databases, they don't correspond exactly to the same meaning. So that makes hard to build big databases. These three problems, data fragmentation, governance, problem of governance, and interoperability, is kind of a universal problem that you meet at the level of a nation. You meet it everywhere. I mean, you have hospitals that are good, but if you look at the level of a nation, this is like everywhere in the world you have these problems. Everybody's facing that. So there is one thing happening in Europe now that I think is very exciting, but we'll see if it succeeds. You know, it's like all these regulations, we're always afraid that it might fail. It's what I mentioned at the beginning. It's called the European Health Data Space. And the goal, so it is a regulation for primary use of data, but I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about secondary use, so for research, right? And the goal is to try to address these three problems. And it's a very punchy regulation, I think, very, very punchy, because let me give you a few statements of this regulation. It is being applied now. It is deployed now. It's beginning. Okay, it will be fully deployed or almost fully deployed within 3 years. Some of the statements, well, first one is all the data producers, the health data producers, will be required to share the data, okay, for public interest research. It's a requirement, and if they don't do, or if there is too much delay to give access to the data, there will be fines distributed, okay, so that's extremely strong. And we are talking about any health data, from genetic data to hospital data and so on. So this is a huge move that, of course, generates a lot of problems that have to be solved. And then you will have in each country health data access bodies that will represent, that will be the gateway to the health data of the country. And you'll have a centered portal where you'll be able to send some query about the data available, not directly on the data, but on the metadata. So what are the data available on diabetes of type 2 all over Europe, and you'll have the answer, and then you'll have a single form to fill up for all the countries to get access. So this is a major change, but again, so you'll have to pay, but the price you will have to pay to access data will be, of course, decided at the national level with some grid, so you won't be able to have, there will not be crazy prices. So we are, with these regulations, like for the AI Act, we are always afraid that it's going to kill innovation maybe and stuff like that, but my point of view is that at least it's the good direction. It's totally unique in the world. I can tell you today, okay, you have the US, you have China, all the other countries are worried about health data, and now everybody in the world, apart from these two blocks, they are looking at Europe and they come to see us in France because they were like the flagship of this thing. So I received a month ago like 28 people from Ministry of Health of Taiwan. South Korea is coming, Japan is coming also. It's like everybody's looking at what Europe is doing because it's a unique initiative. Now, it's very sensitive and we have to be very careful not to fail.
I'd like maybe to challenge you a little bit on that.
Oh yeah, it's easy. It's easy to challenge. It's very easy. I can do it myself.
Yeah, I know. But I know. I like regulation. I mean, I have to navigate regulation. We have many large European trials ongoing. And I must say that I'm very struck by the fact that as part of the data acquisition process that we have in the big iBox kind of data repository and multinational transplant data lake, I can give you one concrete example. You know, I want to have access to the French registry of transplant data. It takes 2 years, and finally, I do not have access. I'm asking the US global repository. I'm getting data about 500,000 donor and recipient in 2 weeks, transferred by a secure server. Then I can load and test my algorithm, make the simulations. So my fear in Europe is that too much regulation will ultimately create some, slow down in the process of innovation. And if you look at how France now is...
Normally it will take 4 months after the regulation to access.
Yeah, but the real life is...
Do you think it's only regulation?
No, it's regulation,
a question of,
I can tell you.
No, it's not only regulation. It's having person to make the data and to keep them, and then to be able to,
in my example, it's
in biobank,
regulation,
it's like that.
But so there are many examples.
I know. But that example is pretty systemic because the fact that it's easier to have access to data from a hospital in US or warehouse, even in UC Health, I was able to get a VPN access to 23 million patients.
Let's talk about that. COVID time in France. The doors to access data to the hospitals were never as closed as it was for COVID. The time where we needed the data, nobody wanted to share, but like never it happened in France. This is not regulation.
Yes. Okay. So there is also, no, but you're touching on a very important point because as you know, France 2030 has put in a lot of money for the hospital to enable to kind of scale up their data warehouse. And at the end of the day, they do not want to share, which is a huge problem. So it's like another piece of the puzzle, but regulation, what I'm facing, I see the difference in terms of streamlines and process in US and France. And I'm not talking about China. But for me, it's really something that can hamper innovation because now I'm training my model on US data to validate in Europe, and I'm in Europe. So guess what? They're gonna make a business out of it in the US. So
no, we are fully agree. In fact, all of us. It's a question of having the facilities to have good workflow, to have all the information and share them, to have the fact that when you generate some data, then you will not be only the provider, but part of the research and part of the sharing and be informed and all of this. So we have to do a lot more, and then perhaps Europe could help us, but it's a lot of cost and a lot of investment, of course, yes.
What is interesting in what you said is all of this seems true at the same time. It's an interesting question between regulation and process. Process is human and habituation of doing something rather than regulation. So what you mentioned about data during COVID, it's interesting because in my institution, and I had nothing to do with it because it's not what I do, but in Pasteur we had all the access we wanted because we were Pasteur, we were tasked to do these things. So for us, we could collect the data because we needed to act upon them. So it's specific. There was a process in case of emergency for the Institut Pasteur to access the data, and then hospital data, all of this to make the models, to predict, and then for the, I don't remember how it was called, the council of something, to tell that we're all going home.
And yeah.
The rest is process. Undeniably, when I love to mock a little bit AI, I take about méthode de bourrin. I have no idea to translate that like like a big data, big something. Doing big something, I mock it because I'm a theoretician in physics, but it's also, you learn to do this. In the US, they're very efficient at doing big something, thinking big, organizing big and everything. Undeniably, in Europe and maybe more in France, we are unused to do these things, to think about the process, to think how to make it efficient. We have the brains, we have the organization, we have the authorization. Sometimes we overinterpret the law within ourselves and think so. So it's going to be very interesting, especially in healthcare where we're all scared to do something bad because there are legal consequences, even we're trying to do as good as we can, is how do we create and how do we have people thinking about processes to make them efficient, while nobody think it's fancy or intellectually appealing to optimize a process. And in what you say, it seems that what needs to be optimized is the process.
And I may have an example on that, because you can use also AI to control regulation. So, we have example where, typically at the end of a clinical study trial, you need to publish a very long report, which is a clinical study report. It could take months or years to publish it. So we have example where actually we use AI to accelerate, the publication of this report is during every single intermediate times of the clinical study trial, but also at the end, what we found is that you can accelerate and divide by 2, the time to publish this report. So it's also, could be ways also to accelerate, this publication as well.
I fully agree. When we started to do something in medical recently with where I'm unused to, we more or less a little bit fine-tuned and just ragged all the major requirements by RGPD and all the rules of the CNILs just to have an idea when we do something if it's legal or not, or what it should be, just to have an adversarial reviewer asking us within it. So then it helped the process because we started to write things the proper way just by having something that just going simply to list us all the mistakes people have done, all the how the rules work or this type of thing, especially when you're unused to do it. So again, it's a process thing. It was not fun to do, but now it's useful.
And there's a second step of the regulation is the use of the AI in care. And this is very important too. So there's a lot For example, I work in academic medicine about how we have to warn the patient that we use AI during the diagnose. And for now, it's not so sure that we have to inform. There's no regulation, so it's always like that. You know, the rules, run with the new step of the use of the AI. So at least it's very new in radiology, for example. But is it needed? Is it obligatory? Do we have to explain when we use AI? And this is going on the pathology department also, because we will use a new algorithm. And then do we have to say to the in the report that we have used AI? So because the third step of the regulation is at least we are the person as a doctor signing the report. So do we have to say that we use this machine to do the immunochemistry and use the AI to help us in the diagnose or not? So this is very important in the regulation to use AI routinely. And then there's a lot of questions still.
Yeah, sorry. There's a very important point for AI and care is adoption and how you push that to clinical care. And one of the bottleneck, and Vincent will agree with me because he's trying with Artefact also, he's doing that, is the fact that in France, if you don't have a reimbursement process for an AI-based tool, you don't find your market. If you're a startup and you don't find your market in France, just because there is no recipe to reimburse something that has AI component for prediction, which is the case nowadays, you are reimbursed like telemonitoring. And what your product is way beyond telemonitoring, even if you have a randomized trial. And now it's very difficult for companies and startups to find their market in France because of that. So what they do, they go to the United States because they can make a deal with a hospital and say, okay, we're going to plug your device. And then, so I think when, Emmanuel, you were talking about return on investment. For example, the iBox system has been developed with a lot of money from the academics, like more than 20 million euros to set up the databases and everything and algorithms. It's deployed in a licensing agreement in a startup in France that develops this software, and the software with the AI component doesn't find any recipe to get reimbursed besides just telemonitoring.
No, reimbursement is regulation, right? So
Yeah.
it's a good thing for innovation, reimbursement? No? No, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I-
but
I-
no, but
well,
in
it's one
France,
example.
in France, it's a huge bottleneck for adoption because a lot of good technologies from France now and built on for some of them from the academic side will not have a return on investment in France just because they will be just shipped away in the US. And I'm sure you have that example as well.
Yes, just maybe to add on that, it's true that today there is a bias that a company like us, I think I'm not the only example, we tend to work more at least with private research. I will not say like US versus Europe, but at least private research rather than public research is way more difficult to work with APHP, for example, than to work with private laboratories today. And there is a bias that it's money driven. So you will put your AI and effort towards a drug that has to be profitable. And maybe, we should also work together, more on the public research and public area to find like maybe a bit less profitable, but at least useful. And it's true that in Europe, the way that it has to be incentivized is that it has to be reimbursed because at the end, it's the way it works, right? So it prevents a bit startup like me or other companies to work with Europe, and they tend to work in the US to have this kind of reimbursement at the end.
And we are all APHP babies here. I mean, some of us, and we love APHP. And
we do love APHP as well. We try many times.
We are navigating this very complex institution, but that's what you say is true. I think there is like a very important bias in these like large hospital and APHP. They tend to think that they can do everything in-house. So you do have French companies that have like ready-to-use solutions, and they are not used because of so many complexities, and they prefer not to use the solution, say that they're going to be developing, on-site. The thing is that it will be great if they will be able to develop, but for some of these solutions, when you have a ready-to-use one adopted, which went through the CE mark and everything, it's not used, and I think it's like a loss of opportunities as well.
Okay, so I think this touches a topic which is actors. So there is whole range of actors. We mentioned public research bodies, agency, public agency. Maybe the health data can be described as an agency. There were two of you mentioned spin-off in your initial presentation. So there are other companies. So anything more to say about how these different players interact together, and is there anything that is important and that could be perhaps improved?
Well, I think we will all agree that they don't interact enough, right? Yeah. So there is a major problem about that, and it's not easy to do. I don't have a solution for that, but this is a fact. I don't know how to solve that problem. At the hub, we are doing our best, but so we are helping building consortium of private companies and academics. We are helping a lot each of them to meet the right people so that they could build consortium. Whenever we answer a European call, we always have startups with us and academic researchers. This is very common for us. So we are, for instance, we are conducting a big project. It was a BPI 8 million project on LLM deployed in hospital, and we have startups with us, and hospitals, and academics. So, but it's not easy.
Why we love to complain, the system works not that badly, in fact. It's just some of the elements we mentioned, some of the elements, and seems to be more related to size of markets, global politics, and the state of the national, funding. There's not going to be a lot of reimbursement because there's no more money. So on a short time scale, they're going to try to maintain the hospital living, and for sure, if you want to make money on a short time scale, you're going to make it elsewhere. And that's it. It's just the environment, and it's not the fault of the domain. So I'm not sure that the interaction between startups, public bodies, research is not doing bad. It's doing very well. There's interaction. There are people going in. There are young people creating startups. There are stuff working, stuff not working. Again, we have an issue with process, but it's more a French type of issue than it is a global type of issue. Things are working well. We're just not at the moment, not in the strongest position in Europe for many, many reasons. If we remember the talk we just had before, there are other constraints that are coming onto us from different sides. So the improvements always, but it's working well. Market and everything is something else.
I should add, I'm heading a consortium for Gustave Roussy, which is Portrait, a BPI consortium with pathologists coming from a private lab, Unicancer and Gustave Roussy and Curie. And there's also two Hawking and Tribun involved. So we worked a lot. There's the implementation of algorithm going to the FDA or CE approvement. But at least working together, it's very important also to highlight the fact that as a pathologist, I'm not always asked as someone knowing the tissues, and there's some researcher, engineers, but not taking time to just try to understand what we want to have. So collaboration is very important. While mixing different knowledge, competence is very important, take time. And going to the deployment of an algorithm is not always gaining money, is gaining time, opportunities to treat the patient. And this is very important to go to this very important point in care. And so I'm fully happy, as I say, to be in Prairie, because I've got the opportunity to have collaboration with researchers coming from a lot of different labs and having other competence than mine. So all is important, at least.
I think there's been quite a shift in paradigm. If you see, I mean, the BPI and also France 2030 initiative really tried, and as you said, to foster now the co-construction of like large academic grants with SMEs. And I think there'll be a lot of seed funding for like small startups to being helped. And I think that in France works pretty well, and it's a very good example of success. The glass half empty will be for the growth, because one of the issue is once you have established good research and interesting papers, I think this is where we are kind of losing it, and we are losing this like scale up of those startups that can take the technology and deploy, and we are coming back to what we were saying before. And a last point that I wanted also to point out is, I like, federated data in the European space. I think it's a great idea, but remember, and if you can look at the YouTube documentary on Demis Hassabis, Nobel Prize, AlphaGo say, oh, thank you Europe for allowing us to have access to all your data. Now we won a Nobel Prize and we are making a huge business out of it. And we make it everything accessible, open access. So there is also a way that I think the collaboration with those big companies can be more established rather than bringing all the data available for everyone, and that they can make a huge business out of France, out of it. But that's part of the thing that we need to navigate.
They were Europe at the time.
No, yeah, but it was a fake Europe, right? They were in UK first of all, and yeah, but it's no, and yeah, I mean it's AlphaFold, and Demis Hassabis stay in UK, but it was really the company there. And I mean, what they did is amazing, truly amazing. But they train most of their model based on publicly available data sets from Europe, because the research was so well curated, the data were available, that they could model the protein structure and train their model pretty well.
Yes, but we do train a lot of things that we implement on publicly available model from the US. So careful with, I mean, pretty much I want to be careful and everything, but all that we get now, because they try to kill each other between companies, all these free models are required to do everything. We are not building foundational models with the funding that we have. So if we cut on one side and they cut on their side, it's going to get really, it's going to maybe happen, but it's going to be complex. It's not just that we are very open, it's also that we benefit a lot from their research.
Yeah, and there are important functionalities that we need, and it's very important for the health data hub. You need to also have not only your array of data, but also the kind of infrastructure which will allow you to use those foundational models that are available and you can use off the shelf. So it's also part of a very important key question. And everyone is afraid, say, oh my God, that's going to be the big company having access to.
And a mix of the competence and the mix of the knowledge and the mix of, and it's very important to not just focusing on the fact that we have to have an algorithm, but how we make it, how we can test it. So collaboration is one of the issue.
Yeah, and at the global level, I mean, of course, at the France level, European level, and then the global level, it's very important to work with all the different countries.
Exactly.
And we are, I mean, there is the AI summit coming in India very soon, and so we are partnership with India, and we are going to bring some health data from India, personal health data from India into France to conduct some research. So this is the kind of things that we have to push, I think, these kind of collaborations.
Have a lot of very good engineers in India, not just to see it in both ways. They produce as many engineers per year as we have in all Europe, so I'm pretty sure they also have good brains, which we should be targeting and making us attractive for them.
Well, no, just on this sovereignty topic, I think it's a very important topic. We see it in every critical industry where you don't want to share the data. So I think there is a fine line to be found. First, it's true that today, if you work with the biggest Google, Microsoft, AWS, there are a lot of accelerators. There are models, as you said, but there are also all these services, that helps and accelerate research. And sometimes, just because there is already a machine set up, you can earn 1 or 2 months of setup. And in the race of research, it's very critical. In the same time, you don't want to put all your data, as you said, in infrastructure that you don't know exactly that who's belong to, how they will be used. So there is this kind of fine line to be found, and I think it's extremely difficult to find it. I think we need to have also this paradox in mind that today, I think I looked at the statistic before coming. 1 French people out of 4 put health data in OpenAI, in ChatGPT. And 1 out of 5 use it every week. So it's already, happening. So we are already transferring this kind of capital to the US.
And
so
80% of the startups in health are using US cloud.
Absolutely. So, voilà. So, but how to be sovereign in this context? I think it's a very difficult question, and I'd rather have the best algorithm playing with the American hub rather than being alone on French and a bit late in the research. And this works for healthcare, but the other industries as well.
Maybe it's an interesting time for closing remarks to say something about the nature of the models that we want to say. In a sense, we're talking a lot about implicit idea that, okay, we put our brains on the shelf and we say more data, and then we say bigger models, and then bigger models say more data, and then it goes on and on. If you sound, I'm still a theoretician, so this type of things upsets me. And but having more models in which you would put knowledge constrained by medical knowledge, by practices, by the fact that the data that you have in hospitals, medical doctors have acted on it because there was decision made in the way you have your data. All of this and the idea of doing smaller, smarter models, much more complex to train because of all these constraints, but that would be more implementable, that would rely less on outside infrastructure of the hospital and thinking about robustness and resilience at the same time could be also a way to put and to have an edge in Europe where we don't lack the brains and the love for modeling and advanced math, and the combination between human knowledge, intervention, and model and AI could be something also interesting from even a strategic point of view.
It's very true in some hospitals where you don't have Wi-Fi today or a good connection, so this is particularly true. I know some.
Obviously not at the APHP.
Okay, so I think we are just a few moments left. I was a bit frustrated that Emmanuel declared that algorithms were less important. So if someone wants to mention a nice algorithm for the last word.
Exaggerated a little bit.
No, but I agree with you. I think, I mean, we build so many algorithms. What makes the algorithm, works well and be generalizable, transportable, is not the fact that you are using type 1, B, or C. And, in our unit, we have a lot of methodologists. The models that we run and the bioinformatics is just models which are available, and there's nothing that no one else could do, but the quality and the granularity and the in-depth of the data and the multimodal approach makes the algorithm out of it great, right? So most of my issue nowadays is to navigate in the ecosystem of collaboration for getting data. But so far, the models that we are using, LLMs, I mean, it can look fancy from the outside, but really anyone can do it. Even, AI can generate its own modeling of that. But pretty provocative, but I agree with your point, Emmanuel.
Okay, so that will be the last word because we're out of time. So thank you very much for being here and for the other for listening.